I'm Bill Holland, your moderator, and I'm here with Whoopi Goldberg and Star Jones. How you doing, Star?
Dude, that stomach staple totally set me right.
It's painful, man, though. How was that? How's it treating you?
Now I look like a skinny person hiding in a fat person's body where it just sags a little bit.
All right. Well, before I ask you what kind of tree you are, let's move on to what we were talking about, amp modeling. So I have a guitar. I don't have an amp, but I got this kind of not quite craptacular plug-in that emulates amps. We're not going to name any names.
Amplitude.
But anyway, we're going to take that and we want to make that sound halfway decent so it doesn't completely sound like I'm like hitting a badger over the head with a raccoon.
There are things.
Welcome back to Crosstalk.
First step is listen. Listen to the signal. Listen to what it sounds like, what it needs, stuff like that. Second advice I can give is don't use presets. Start from scratch. You know what I mean? If you're using like Guitar Rig or something, you have the options of just building the sound. So if you start with a preset, it's already got everything on there already. You know, it's already got your speaker emulators, your microphone emulators, and all that crap. Placement, all that stuff, which is cool, but you want to just start with scratch because you don't want to overdo it with any of that type of software. That's the biggest problem I hear is people are overdoing it. Too many effects.
You get that like.
Well,
you sounded like Space Drone on Reactor.
All right, for people who don't already know how a sound is supposed to operate or how it's supposed to sound like, what you do is the simplest thing that you can do.
Like laptop producers?
Like, I mean, anybody.
No, just kidding.
I mean, like, but you know, like you don't like jump to like just going like, hey man, I gotta do it like this. It's like you take a simple like A/B sort of situation. You put on the record that you want this guitar to sound like. Because I know for a fact that every one of you stupid children want it to sound like some record. All right,
Wham, make it big.
Wham, do all right.
That's what all the kids are into right now.
Wham, make it big.
Actually, I think they're more into like
New Young Pony Club.
No, like Salt and Peppa. They're getting all that stuff. They're bringing back like the late '80s New Jack Swing and stuff. You know?
Yeah, no, but like for guitar sounds, let's say like these kids really into Van Halen, so you put on Panama. You're like, man, I really want it to sound like Panama. So you A/B, literally take the track, listen to it, loop it, and just go like, and then just tweak the knobs until it sounds as close to that as you can get it. Because like that's the only way you're going to get a decent sound. It may not sound exactly like it, but you're going to get a good approximation. Therefore, you can pull out, instead of trying to overdrive your gain for like 30 stages, you're like, dude, why doesn't it sound good? Why doesn't it sound like Panama? And you're like, well, all right, like A/B it. Make sure that you just remember that after you're done with the modeling, you're going to have to put it into a room. And in this situation, since it's all digital, you're going to have to put reverb, and you're going to have to do some sort of reverb modeling.
Give it a place.
Give it a place.
Well, and realize too, I mean, there are certain things like when you're working with limited equipment, there's the aesthetic of your sound too. I mean, I have a friend who he got to a point at one point where he said, well, I have crappy equipment, not a lot to work with, so I'm going to go with something that sounds very DIY aesthetically. Yeah. I'm not going to try to be like, crazy, like, David Sylvian, like ambient guitar stuff or something.
I'm actually not even talking about like on an aesthetic level. Just take away any aesthetics for a second and just think from a very, very like point place. Like I got crappy equipment. Well, this is what I can do with crappy equipment. Right. There's certain things that you're going to have to do to get a desired trait out of something. Exactly. You know what I mean? So like if you're going for the Descendants, first 3 records sound, you're going to have to listen to that guitar sound. You're going to have to, idealize
figure out what you want.
Yeah, and then you're going to have to realize that this was recorded analog, so you got to put it in a room. You're going to have to put it somewhere. You can't. The number one mistake a lot of new kids do is forget to put the reverb on it, or they put too much reverb. Too much. So it's like you got to like think about the acoustics of some certain things, sound properties. Yeah, all that sort of stuff, so you can avoid looking like Senator Craig in a musical sense.
Thank you for that.
Bam!
Mental image. So, Drew, given that note, what are you thinking about this?
Well, I think Britton brings up a really good point when it comes to having an idea of what you want it to sound like. Now, given there's 2 kind of avenues of production, and that's like, I know what I want, and I'm going to try and get that. And then there's tons of people who kind of take the improv approach where they're just kind of like tweaking stuff out until it sounds okay. You know what I mean? These are both methods used by lots of different people, but I think it's more important, like what Britton was saying, to have an idea of what you want it to sound like and shoot for that sound and go for it that way. Go ahead.
I mean, I'm sorry to interrupt, but every producer that's made a record that you've probably owned already knows what they want.
Yeah, exactly.
Right before, like, doing the improv thing is great for experimenting when you're at home.
Yeah.
All right, like, I'm producing this hip hop track on Reason, or I'm using Amplitude or whatever, and you're just jacking around trying to figure out properties on how to like extrapolate things and try to pull out certain, you know, characteristics of a sound quality. That's cool. You're gonna have to do that, but do that on your own time. When you're actually trying to make a track, you don't have time for that. You have to go for a sound. You have to visualize what would set this song, what would set this mood right. Act like a producer for once in your life. If we're gonna eliminate them from popular music, you know, and you're gonna be the home bedroom studio, you know, yogi that you want to be, you're gonna have to start thinking outside of, you know, well, I'm an artist. It's like, well, you have to enhance that. You have to create these aesthetics out of these things. And I mean, I know this sounds like really esoteric in a certain sense, but it's very important and key. You'll never make a record that sounds good. Like the reason why Elliott Smith's records sound like Elliott Smith records, because Elliott Smith wanted it to sound like that. You know what I mean? And it's like he went for an aesthetic. He had an idea. He had a placement. You know what I mean? And when he changed it, it didn't work sometimes. Sometimes it did. You just have to keep that stuff in mind.
Absolutely. That's why I suggest starting from scratch with all these types of guitar rig or whatever you're using. Just start with nothing and then, you know, put a little compression on the signal or, you know, just building blocks one at a time, just like Legos. You know, just you have to start with one block and then see how it sounds. Do A to B switching, compare what you did to the sound. You know, keep like the initial signal in the back of your mind and don't lose track of what it initially sounded like. Because
I already know the next question that we're going to get
What is that gonna be?
later. How do you do all of that? You know, we're talking about very general terms. And like the thing is that like before anything else, you need to really understand what sounds are incorporated with what pieces of equipment or what models of equipment. All right. Like the reason why he's talking about compression. It's like it's very important that you have compression in certain cases. And you're like, what? Why do I need compression?
Right.
Well, it's because you want to level out the signal so high and lower frequency sounds are even with the, you know, like quieter,
especially
you know,
like with vocals. That's
key.
That's key because a lot of times you're recording a vocal, and if you record a vocalist, this, you know, on a side note, noticing this, recording vocals early on doing production, you record a female vocalist and she's all, you know, and then back down again, and you're like playing with the levels, and to an extent you can control that with the volume, but really what a compressor does is levels that out a little bit for you, and it brings it back down to earth a little bit. Especially these people's voices vary so much, and the guitar is the same way.
A guitar is the same way, but it's also very important that you realize, like, people will ask you, like, how do I get the monster lead sound that, like, you know, happens on the last 3 strings of the guitar? You know what I mean?
Sure.
Like, and people like forget for a second that that's so much compression that it's not even funny. Like you really smash the heck out of those guitars because you want the low strings to sound about as equal. Now, why are we going to do reverb? Because we have to put it in a place.
Right.
Why are we overdriving the signal? So we can make it sound crunchy, so we can make it sound like this. Why are we going to put a delay on it? Maybe it's because you want it to sound spacey. It's like these tools are for you to visualize what you want out of a sound. So for all the beginning kids, before you even get into the fact of recording, before you even step and take your guitar and plug it into anything, research a little bit about what each effect does and why it does what it does, so you have a basic knowledge of what you're getting into.
Experiment. That's how you can learn. Because, I mean, if you don't know what everything sounds like, how are you going to envision what it should sound like? So you tweak it, you know, experiment with it, and then when you have a better idea of what everything does, you can do the building block approach.
Well, and even, you know, in terms of DAWs, if they're using a DAW to do all this, remember too, once you've created that guitar effect, you're going to be balancing out against other sounds in the mix. So what you think you might want the guitar to sound like might not actually be what you want it to sound like in the mix, because it might not go well against the other. When you place it against vocals and bass or whatever, it may not sound the way you thought it would, because when you solo that track, it may sound one way, and then you put it in it sounds completely different.
Well, you're dealing at that point, you're dealing with a whole different beast. There's a difference between tracking and getting sounds.
Okay, maybe I've gone too far.
Yeah, and mixing is you know, because like some band comes in with a Vox AC30 and his Stratocaster guitar, they record it. You know, that's why most people, you know, some people lay compression to tape, which is good when you're smart enough to know that you got to lay this compression, and they do all that stuff afterwards, but they don't EQ it. Why don't they EQ it? Well, it's because the fact is they don't know where it's going to sit in the mix yet.
Right.
This guitar may be a post-punk thing, and it needs to be really jangly and sitting kind of in the back where the bass is riding a little more up front. Or this may be like a harder rock sort of thing, like guitar rock.
It's at the forefront.
Yeah, it's at the forefront, and you need lots of distortion and gain. And like they're not messing with that yet. They're going to be they're just trying to get the signal. They want the sound basic right. You want the silhouette before you fill it in.
Right, exactly.
Yes.
And I kind of went over there. So
yeah,
that's the way I think. It's electronic producers. We're all nuts.
Well, no, I mean, like, I think what you're tackling on, honestly, as far as just like simple production standpoint, is in electronic music you have everything that you need already set up. So most of the time when you start with songs, you've already tracked the drum. You've set the drums,
building the loops, and you're going, okay, I need this over here, and then okay, maybe we'll have a solo over here, so we'll go back and re-record that. But for the most part, you know everything's sitting.
Yeah,
because it's not a matter of figuring that out in your mind. You're building it, so it's more like being a producer as a composer or as a band, as opposed to being a band and then trying to produce it.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, like, so you're dealing with a totally different, like, animal. And that's why, like, synthesizers and stuff like that always go DI, because it's like most of the time, like, when you're using this sort of stuff outside of a live situation, everything is kind of automatically sitting at a level that you've already done. That's why you turn up the volume a little bit more on the drum machine, because you're sending the signal just to fit right in as soon as you... And that's why you barely EQ anything.
Yeah.
So therefore, I mean, like, you've kind of just like, but we're dealing with guitar modeling, we're dealing with guitar guys. Most of the time, they really want live sounds. They want live stuff. So you gotta sit and go tracking, then mixing.
Right.
And you can't do both at the same time, because then you're always just gonna end up with a jumble of shit. I mean, like, it's just like, it's not even. I'm sorry, it may sound mean, but like it's.
No, it literally is. I mean, you can get to a point where you're monkeying around so much with sound that you've just. 6 hours have passed and you've got nothing done, because I've done that before.
Oh yeah.
You have your effects
Space
pedals
warp,
out and you're just
black
like
hole.
For all the know-it-alls out there, you should to get a little more advanced, you should only be spinning about 4 hours per mix.
Yeah.
Then you're going to get ear fatigue, and then everything's going to sound like crap.
Yeah. And I did that a few weeks ago, and sometimes even you don't learn after a while, and you're like, oh, listen back, and somebody's like, oh, the vocals are way too
Sounded
too low.
great last night. I don't know.
Dude, it's like rock last night. We were totally rocking out in the basement, and then you like listen to it, and you're like, oh, that's weak. Where the hell did the guitar go? And
yeah. So I mean, like, those are all things that you're getting ahead, but like with the modeling and all that other stuff, it's so important that you take away and just
And I know this is kind of a moot point, and like most people know this, but get a decent pair of monitors, because I know a lot of people when they started off mixing or producing on their own, they were using like their Iowa speakers that came with their college stereo or whatever. Actually, I know people who still do that, but
hey man, I ain't gonna lie. When I'm doing scratch tracks, I just run them through the computer.
Well, yeah, why not? But I mean, for a when you're trying to get figure out what your sound actually sounds like, you can get a decent pair of monitors for not that much.
That's true.
Well, here's the
devil's
advocate.
Okay.
Why do you think
this is why we have you?
90% of the records that you hear are mixed on NS10s or Orotone cubes?
Yep.
Because they sound like crap. They sound like utter. I'm not going there.
But when you think about it, how many people are listening to a record on really good studio monitors? Not that many. Most people are listening on a car stereo.
That's the difference.
A lot of headphones.
That's your difference between reference and mains. I mean, like, mains are supposed to sound incredibly awesome, and then your references are to reference.
Click it over.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And that's why I actually think you should probably be mixing on, like, computer speakers and stuff, because if you can get it to sound good there,
I'm not going to lie. I mix on computer speakers and then take it to the monitors here. So
yeah, exactly. And see, I mean, because then you have a good level set.
Actually, the more speakers, the better.
If you have a variety, it's good. I mean,
not at the same time, of course.
Well, no, but I mean, and there's always the CD test. I mean, I'll do a rough mix and go jump in my car and drive around for a while and just be like, drive up and down Western, like listen to the track, and
your car's a great reference because you're used to the way it sounds. You know what I mean? And if you listen to one of your own recordings on it, it sounds. You can kind of compare it to what you're used to hearing. And I listened to like some acoustic guitar I produced the other day in my car, and I just immediately realized, oh man, I just had way too much upper high end, like
well, and
5
even with
to 10K,
and like in electronic music too. I mean, I know this is like a moot point, but I've started incorporating more guitar into my electronic music, and you have to take consideration now too. If this track is up on MySpace and it's got really horrible MP3 compression on it, is it still going to sound like a good track? It's still going to be hot.
That's a very good point.
So,
that's a whole different thing that you got to.
It's the future.
Well, I remember talking to Dan about this in a previous episode about mixing for MP3s, which is a whole different. It's a concept that you got to really start working for towards the future of music, where you're actually making and fudging mixes so the masking doesn't happen as well. So you actually you dramatically increase certain frequency levels to avoid that situation.
Wow.
It's something that's going to have to be done. They do it for TV all the time. Now MP3s and digital music is the new future. So it's like now people are, I think engineers should start taking that into account.
Well, I've started noticing that. I get a lot of promo stuff from bands, and when I get it, I'll hold up to for a while I was holding up to my stuff and going, well, why is the master so, how'd they get the master up that high?
Yeah.
And so then I was like, oh, well, they used Ultra Maximizer or whatever. They kicked it up with a limiter so that it's up there. And what a limiter, what it basically does is, you're able to take it up there without it actually breaking the ceiling.
Well, again, these are whole. You're
I know we're going off. But
we're putting the horse, way behind the cart at this point. You know what I mean?
What kind of horse is it?
You really
Clydesdale.
No, I don't want to know. I'm sorry.
I really want to know. No, but like let's get back on topic about this sort of
let's
stuff.
get back on the train. Wagon.
I mean, like, there's other things that you can do. Is like the reason why they name these models that don't sound quite like them is because you're trying to go for an approximate sound.
Right.
So here's a good idea for most people is take a preset, right? Just any preset, like like
metal or jazz or whatever.
Jazz or British tone.
British tone.
I know that's one that's like the most generic, but British tone.
It's on everything.
Yeah, and you're like, man, this sounds like crap, dude. And you're like, but wait, this is the approximation of what I want it to sound like.
Right.
So therefore, you start with that tone, and then you start scooping things, and you start changing the settings and the volumes, and the mids, the trebles, and stuff like that. Then you have your sound, and you didn't have to work that hard for it. You just set the preset up, you tweak the preset to your liking. And, and it's a good starting point for beginning guys who need to get a sound fast.
I find a big problem with a lot of these plugins is that you hit the preset and it's too muddy or there's way too much clarity to the point where it sounds bad.
This is with all guitar multi-effects,
Yes.
period. Whether it's on the computer or whether it's a rack mount or whatever. Every single preset I've ever heard was oversaturated with too much stuff.
Right.
You know what I mean? So like a lot of beginners, their sound is oversaturated because they're using presets and they're not, realizing that, it's got delay, phase, reverb, distortion, amp modeling, mic, all that stuff is on. So you just need to turn a few of them off and, start with a little bit less.
Yeah, no, and you just take it back down, take everything back down to its basic thing, and then you build it up slowly.
Right.
So I think we kind of tackled that subject sufficiently.
Yeah. Cool. And now this is the place where we would normally obviously look at viewer feedback. But since we haven't received any emails from anyone, we can't do that. But contact us at crosstalk@gearwire.com. That's crosstalk, one word, at gearwire.com. And send us questions, concerns, things you're trying to figure out, and we will go over it. Much like...
be careful. Just be careful.
Yeah, be careful because he's got
sharp teeth.
He's got sharp teeth. Very sharp. Now, for those of you out there who are part of the MVP contest, or if you have friends, family, relatives, or small children who are part of the MVP contest, please go on the site and vote. Check out who's doing it. There are a lot of really cool guys with a lot of really good info out there and who are extremely helpful, who are willing to share their knowledge with the world. So go on, gearwire.com, check out the MVPs. We have a whole section set aside for it. And go to gearwire.com/MVP vote.html. That's gearwire.com/MVP vote.html. And vote for your favorite poster. Do you guys have a favorite?
I don't even know who the fuck's on there.
All right. I think King Friday's on there. There's a lot of those. A lot of people didn't send their photos. You see that?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, King Friday rocking out.
Huh?
We'll go with the theme. You should start dressing like Mr. Rogers. Come on, wear like the suit. Take off your shoes. You have. Anyway, thank you for joining us. This is Bill Holland for GearWire.com. This is Drew Craig and Chubbs, Britton, Tennis Shoes, Weatherall.
Yep.
And this has been Crosstalk on GearWire.com.
Peace.